Welcome, everybody. I'm Joy Beeland, and I am the CMMC Training Program Manager with Edwards Performance Solutions. And with me today, we have Brian Hubbard. Brian, you want to say hello?
Hi, I'm Brian Hubbard. So I'm the Director of Commercial and Cybersecurity at Edwards Performance Solutions.
Brian and I got together and thought that we would create a quick series of 6 videos to walk through some basic knowledge around CMMC as something to provide for the CMMC ecosystem that is craving accurate knowledge right now. So until we can come out with the official certification courses, we wanted to walk through a series of 6 training videos. This first one is going to be focusing on why CMMC exists, a bit of the history and the background, and it's pretty interesting. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks again for joining us. The objectives here is really just to talk about why it was created and how that is going to play into what we see happening within the DoD and the defense industrial base. So as many of you might have seen, if you read anything on CMMC, it always starts out with a statistic from 2016 that is from the Executive Office of the President. The U.S. economy is hemorrhaging somewhere between $57 and $109 billion. Now that's a pretty vast range, in my opinion, and as much as 600 billion, or 1% of the GDP, is lost to cybercrime. Now, I am always a big person about statistics, and I said 2016, why is the government citing a figure from 2016? So I looked at the consecutive Executive Office of the President reports 2017 through 2020, and they stopped mentioning this statistic because they had no way of measuring it. Really, it's just completely out of control for what can you attribute to cybercrime? How does that impact the economy? Because there's so many different variables and ways of measuring that. But what I can tell you is this: for what we know from what has been reported, you can see how it just continues to climb every year, and it gets cumulative over time, obviously. The biggest problem that I see about the reporting of cybercrime is that the Internet Crime Complaint Center, which I think has the most up-to-date statistics, has to rely on people self-reporting what that damage is to their environment, and then trying to attribute some kind of dollar value to it. In my mind, what I've said for years is that I would guess maybe 50% of cybercrime is actually reported. There's a bunch of reasons for that. You know, if somebody's in the middle of actively trying to do forensics and clean up a cyber breach, what they don't want is the FBI to step in and try to help out or determine a dollar value for what the impact is and get answers. So they really don't want to be slowed down in the remediation process. They're worried about their brand, their reputation. They're worried about having to report it if there's some kind of compliance mandate for doing reporting within a certain period of time. So these figures are highly inaccurate. But even as they are from 2016, you can see that this is something that the defense industrial base needed to help address with the DoD. The aggregate loss for the unclassified information, unclassified controlled information. And by the way, CMMC is not going to reach into classified information in any way. Any of your businesses or your clients that have classified information, CMMC does not apply, because that's a whole different ballgame, a whole different animal, a whole different level of background checks and controls. So CMMC addresses FCI, CUI, CTI, okay? But really this needs for standards enforcement came along and was addressed in Executive Order 13556, basically because there wasn't a way for us to be controlling what was happening in the hemorrhaging of all of this intellectual property and controlled unclassified information. So we're estimating that more than 300,000 contractors and subcontractors will be affected by this. And the cybersecurity requirements brought in, like 800-171, allowed for a very broad interpretation of how are these controls going to be implemented, and allowed for self-attestation. You can just imagine self-attestation. You know, I think a lot of businesses would want to be able to say, oh yeah, we're doing it. And for whatever reason, usually limited resources, not lend the focus necessary to really supporting the controls that they had attested were being applied. So the DoD recognized this. We have to have a better way of applying some standards to this. By industry, it's pretty surprising. Higher education was actually doing the best job, probably because their environment, in my mind, is a lot more easy to manage compared to some of the other environments like construction, professional services, manufacturing, engineering. But you can see how the disparity lies in what they actually implemented, what they were in the process of doing, and what they hadn't actually even started on. So CMMC was born, right? The idea behind this is that we're going to have basically one conformed standard that everyone is going to have applied to them, so that there's a truth in the maturity level that a company is going to be assessed in. It was incorporated into DFARS, and it's going to start crawl, walk, run type of phasing that we'll get a little bit more into. But by 2026, all contracts coming out of the DoD are going to have some level of requirement in it if you handle FCI or CUI. Okay. The level required in a contract, of course, is going to be commensurate with the sensitivity of the information that's in that contract. So if it's just FCI, it's level 1. If it has CUI in it in any way, it's level 3 and higher. Okay. And so really what the model transition is going from having cybersecurity being part of what's required in order to be a supplier to the DoD to becoming the foundation of. So not only do you have to come in on cost and have your price be competitive, not only do you have to meet the scheduling and be able to prove that you can perform at the foundation, the baseline for that, you have to prove that you have the required level of cybersecurity.
Joy, can I inject something in there? So one of the things, when you talk about that foundational piece, it's not only foundation for these requirements, right? The interim rule and the DFAR thing. It actually, the DoD went as far as to change something called DoD 5000. The whole acquisition policy has been restructured for cybersecurity. So basically to create cybersecurity as a requirement from the very root of every procurement and all the way up through. So that's why you'd see really this is a graphic from DoD, right? That they're saying, hey, it's no longer just the cybersecurity thing off to the side. Cybersecurity is the foundation, and cost, schedule, and performance cannot be met. Those requirements can't be met without cybersecurity. So just a note that it's not just it's a sea change in the way DoD does acquisitions, which is why it's not likely to fall on its face like many other attempts over certainly over my 35-year history have tried and failed in acquisition reform. This actually is a major acquisition reform and has been put into place. So it's something to note.
Yeah, and it has legs. As we're seeing, there's other government entities that are considering incorporating CMMC into their supply chain as well. It wouldn't be surprising if that happens. So there's many, 300,000 organizations out there that are going to be seeking certification. By 2025, I think it's October 2025, is when the fiscal year ends, and then starting from there forward into 2026, all contracts will have some level of CMMC certification requirement in it. So that level will allow you to bid on or perform on those contracts according to your maturity level, right? And it's valid for 3 years. Now, there is some caveat to that, and we'll go through this later, but if there's a major change in your infrastructure, you may need to be recertified, which would make sense. And while you're maintaining, while you're waiting in that 3-year cycle, you have to be continuing to practice the processes and implement those controls on a regular basis that you've been certified at. And that's how you hang on to your certification. All right, so the model in itself basically is going to encompass a few different areas. The first is, let's take the domains that come from 800.171. They actually added a few more, but these domains that were already out there in the ecosystem, and break them into their capabilities. And based on the maturity level that you're seeking, you're going to be implementing more and more of those capabilities, going from low to high. So the first level has 17 capabilities, all the way through 171 capabilities when you get to the end of the maturity levels there. And in those capabilities, you're showing what you're practicing, and then you're also adding in proof that the process is established. So the process is backed up by policies and documentation. But we're going to get into a lot more detail in all of this. But just as a general overview, this is kind of how the CMMC works, the idea behind it. Okay. The domains that I was talking about, those 17 domains, each of them is broken into different types of capabilities. The capabilities will have different types of practices. So let's look at what that looks like. This is just a great big checkerboard grid that you're looking at right here. Don't worry, because our 5th segment after lunch is going to dive into all of these and take a look at each of the different practices within these domains. But of note, asset management, recovery, and situational awareness were added in with the CMMC creation. Those are 3 domains that were not in the original 800-171, I believe. Okay. And so what that looks like as you go level 1 through level 5. Level 1, and you're going to see this throughout the day. Also, one of the things we've done in presenting this training with you is to make sure that you have graphic representation of how CMMC works in many different forms. So there's going to be different ways that we're showing you the same information, and some of them are going to resonate more with others. And you can use these in having this conversation with your stakeholders. Okay, so just so you know that. Most of the people who are doing, most of the organizations supplying to the DoD now are going to only need to qualify at level 1. So they deal with the FCI, federal contract information. They need to show of the 17 different practices that they're performing those. So it's ad hoc. Yes, we do this, and they need to be able to prove that yes, this is what we do. But they don't need to have that level of documentation, policies and processes behind that. When you transition from the basic safeguarding of step 1 or level 1 of safeguarding of the FCI into level 2 and higher, it's a substantial jump. Every time that you go up a level, you are adding in a substantially larger amount of practices that, and it's all cumulative, but then also how your organization is supporting that. So level 1 is really just, let's just do it. Level 2 is we're doing it and we're documenting it, right? Number 3 is we're doing it, we're documenting, and now we're proving that we can manage it. And by proving that we can manage it, we are providing a plan that shows ongoing support, update, and improvement of this whole, all of the practices that we are implementing up to this point. Level 4 and 5 are really into, we're measuring it now, and we're continuing to optimize and standardize it. 4 and 5 is really going to address APTs. And so that's the biggest push behind it. And let's take a look at this another way, because when you see what that means in numbers, on the right-hand margin there, we're going to see the number of domains and practices that each of these is adding in. So cumulatively, you go from 17 practices in level 1 to 72 in level 2, right? So you're still doing the first 17, but that you're adding in another 55. And that's spread out over 15 domains as opposed to just 6 domains. So that's another great slide for you to be able to use if you need to explain CMMC to your stakeholders. They're cumulative, as I said. At level 3, an organization is expected to be implementing all of the practices from 1, 2, and 3, right? And then the processes that are added in, meaning the documentation with the policies and the processes, level 2 and higher. So capabilities and practices, right? Let's take a look. I'm going to just go ahead and throw all of this onto the screen here. You have to demonstrate that the processes and practices are consistent, repeatable, and high quality. So this is what the assessors are going to be looking for. And the proof of that, and we'll get into as an assessment is done, what kind of objective evidence are they looking to collect from you. So you have to show you continue to perform the activity, not that you just started to do it yesterday and just for the assessment, but even during a stressful situation, that is something that everyone knows how to practice, right? And the capabilities are based on a mixture of cyber frameworks, not just in the United States, but for those of you that are familiar with it, the UK Cyber Essentials and the Aussie Essential 8, some of their frameworks are mixed into how these capabilities and practices were developed as part of CMMC. So looking at what's next, we can see that the interim rule right now is in effect, but as they start to get into this year, 2021, we will have contracts starting to roll out that have at least a level 1 requirement on them. Again, it's going to be crawl, walk, run. It's not going to be overnight because the DoD knows that there's a significant investment in resources, and the DoD hasn't even completed the training for what is necessary as a skill set for the assessors and the certified professionals to have. Okay.
So a couple of slides back, we talked about that 90% level 1 idea, right? And that's really what the DoD thinks. And I'm sure that some of you that have been out working NIST 800, 171 and things have experienced it as well. But what we're finding in reality as we go out and consult with clients and work with it, I firmly believe that it's going to be more like 75%, 25%, and the 75% is going to weigh in on the level 3 side and the 25% on the level 1 side.
Wow.
And that's because contractors don't want to box themselves in. So everybody and primes haven't figured out how to actually ask for the requirements yet. So everybody wants to position, at least at this time, everybody's trying to position themselves to be level 3. So everybody's kind of aspiring to level 3. Now, whether or not that ultimately is what happens, it's something that organizations really need to look hard at, and how they architect their systems, how they architect their solutions to protect CUI if they get it, if they don't have it. You know, if their contracts don't currently require it, but yet they aspire to have contracts that do, then they have the opportunity to architect their solution in a way that maybe minimizes the part of their organization that has to do that, go that extra mile and be that level 3.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, just a piece of commentary there that, you know, in reality, when the DoD says, hey, it's going to be 90% level 1, reality has so far sort of dictated differently.
Yeah.
So anyway, just want to let you know that.
And I'm sure that there's no shock in that, commentary there. The other thing is that, when you read the DFIR's ruling and we gave you guys copies of it, the DoD actually went through and did the research on what they thought the investment would be for the businesses to achieve level 1. But it's based on the assumption that if you've been doing business with them for the last, 3 years, since 2017, I think it is, and you self-attested that you were already achieving the 800-171 controls, that this is a very small jump to get the level 1 certification. So, they're basing it on, hey, you guys said that you were doing this already, so the money required to get there is going to be a small jump. And then the other thing about what you brought up, Brian, is that I also believe a lot of organizations will want to get level 3 because it's going to be something that will help with business development. Not necessarily because they want to get the contracts, but they want other companies outside of the government ecosystem or the DoD ecosystem to know that their business has achieved level 3.
Exactly.
I do see that as something that's going to be a revenue generator down the road. All right, so that's the end of session 1.